There are over 10,000 species of birds, making them the second largest vertebrate group after the bony fish. Debate lies over whether birds are their own class, which traditionally have been called class Aves, or if they're an order of reptiles, in other words, order Aves. Birds are most closely related to other archosaur reptiles, including crocodilians and dinosaurs. In fact, birds evolved from a clade of bipedal dinosaurs that developed feathers. Birds are set apart from other vertebrates by having feathers and beaks. Feathers are essentially modified scales. Birds, bats, and pterosaurs are all flying vertebrates, but the flight evolved out of different forms of adaptations. Most birds can fly due to feathers and because of a lighter skeleton. Feathers first evolved in early reptiles by means of thermoregulation, not flight. All birds are endothermic, specifically homeothermic, and that their body temperature remains consistent due to metabolic features. Flight also helps with this since it takes an exorbitant amount of energy to fly and thus body heat is produced. To say that one eats like a bird since they eat very little is actually incorrect. Birds have a hearty diet to keep up with those high energy demands. Before discussing the hallmark adaptations of most birds, flight, we need to review the adaptations used to help birds with flight. First of all, birds produce two types of feathers. Contour feathers, which have parallel barbs that branch from a central shaft and create lots of interlocking features. At the microscopic level, these barbs overlap, making a strong, flexible single surface. Down feathers do not interlock and mostly function in insulation, similar to hair in mammals. Birds are lightweight due to having pneumatic bones, which are hollow because of having less compact bone and more open, spongy bone. Compact bones make bones heavier, which would cause flight to be much more energetically costly. The jaw bones are replaced with a keratinized beak, which is lighter and lacking teeth. The beak is sharp enough to grind and tear food. Birds lack a urinary bladder, but instead have a cloaca. This is an opening that releases digestive and urinary waste as well as the release of sperm and egg. The cloaca can reabsorb water and solutes as needed back into the blood vessels. Birds do not create urine as do mammals, but urate salts, which appear as crusty white color mixed with feces from intestines. This is also seen in some reptiles as well as your windshield. In addition, birds can have only one of each paired organs in order to reduce body weight. Bird lungs are vastly different from other tetrapods due to flight. Many pneumatic bones are connected to air sacs in the body cavity, which replace coulomnic fluid, lessening the weight of the bird. In reptiles and mammals, air flows into and out of the mouth and nose from the lungs. In birds, each respiratory cycle takes two inhalation. The first inhalation, air goes from the trachea to the posterior air sacs. The second inhalation moves air into the anterior sacs and out of the body. Exhalation moves fresh air through the lungs and pushes out used air. In reptile and mammal lungs, exhalation includes unused air, which makes respiration less efficient. In air sacs, blood vessels exchange gas via diffusion. This elongated respiratory system ensures that all air that enters the body is used with little oxygen leaving, unlike our exhalation, which contains some oxygen. Birds also have a thin epidermis with no sweat glands, but they do have a uropygial gland that produces sebum to oil the feathers. In fact, birds undergo preening by spreading sebum over the feathers, sometimes using their beak to help with this process. Birds also have a four-chambered heart versus three found in reptiles and amphibians. This separates the oxygenated blood from the deoxygenated blood, allowing for a much more active lifestyle. Birds still retain nuclei in their red blood cells, which is actually a feature lost in mammals, allowing for mammals to carry more oxygen in their blood. In fact, this might be a trade-off since our respiration is not as efficient as birds. While feathers provide insulation, most birds use them for flying. Feathers provide lift against gravity and thrust to keep birds airborne. Feathers are also asymmetrical and curved, allowing for a more aerodynamic body plan. There are two types of flight feathers, both of which are contour feathers. First are the primary feathers. found at the tips of the wings and provide thrust as well as downward movement. Secondary feathers are found closer to the body and cover the forearm region, providing lift. Contour feathers found on the body help reduce drag, making a more aerodynamic experience. The chest muscles are responsible for flapping the wings, specifically the pectoralis major and the supracoracoideus, providing downstroke and upstroke flapping motions. By the way, these make up the breast meat in poultry. Both muscles are found on the keel of the sternum, and this keel allows for a more aerodynamic flight. Flight muscles in birds are really efficient at storing myoglobin. Since muscles require exorbitant amounts of oxygen to produce ATP, oxygen is stored in muscles as myoglobin and used during flight to allow birds to travel longer distances at a time. While most land vertebrates have two clavicles, or collarbones, birds have a fused collarbone called a furcula, or a wishbone. This flexible bone allows shoulder girdle to be flexible enough during flapping. As mentioned earlier, birds belong to the reptilian lineage of archosaurs, which include the crocodilians, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Birds evolved from the Saurischian clade of dinosaurs, also known as the lizard-hipped dinosaurs. Within this group, they could be split into sauropods, including the famous brachiosaurs, or theropods, which were bipedal dinosaurs similar to T-Rex and Velociraptor. Theropods are thought to be the specific clade by which birds evolved from. First, recent fossil evidence shows feathers on theropod dinosaurs, and being bipedal was an important pre-adaptation for flight. Freeing the arms from the ground was necessary for the forearms to eventually become wings. Theropod dinosaurs with feathers were likely too heavy to fly, but had feathers for thermoregulation and possibly for communication. One of the earliest and still significant of bird ancestors was an intermediate dinosaur bird called Archaeopteryx, which lived 200 to 145 million years ago. This animal had theropod dinosaur features, such as being bipedal, having a tail, and having teeth, but it also had bird-like features by having feathers, a beak-like mouth, and flight. It is likely that this animal was more of a glider than a true flyer. While there is little debate that feathers evolved for thermoregulation, how did bird flight evolve? Well, there's two hypotheses. The arboreal hypothesis states that tree-dwelling precursor organisms jump from tree to tree, using feathers to glide before becoming capable of flapping for flight. Think of the niche of a flying squirrel as an example, even though that's a mammal. The terrestrial hypothesis states that the bipedal features of theropods allowed them to run faster, and that running was an important part of taking off before flight. The feathers assist with balance, much like ostriches do when they run. Endothermy may have evolved as a way for animals to be active at all hours of the day. Feathers may have evolved for camouflage, social signals, or waterproofing. It's likely that both features co-evolved together. So what are the major groups of modern birds? Modern birds became dominant after the extinction of the dinosaurs over 65 million years ago. There are three major clades of living birds. The Paleognathae, which include flightless birds like ostriches, emus, rheas, and kiwis. The Galloantherae, which includes pheasants, ducks, geese, and swans. And the Neoaves, including all other bird groups, which are actually divided into 5 clades. First is the Strassories, also known as the nightjars, swifts, and hummingbirds. The Columbaves, which are the bustards, cuckoos, pigeons, and doves. The Gruiformes, which includes the cranes. Agrolithonites, which are your diving birds, wading birds, and shorebirds. The Anopinaves, which includes the hawks, owls, woodpeckers, parrots, falcons, crows, and songbirds. Again, like most life, evolutionary relationships are constantly being viewed in light of new fossil and molecular evidence. So now we will move on to the other lineage of reptiles, the mammals.